So for the past few weeks, I have spent time on analyzing a dataset which is the records about international airlines flying in and out of Australia since 1985. And obviously, we have all noticed that 2020 has been an extraordinary and unpeaceful year. Since the beginning of the year, we not only have had the intense bushfire season in Australia, but also the global coronavirus pandemic. And my question is, what kind of significant impacts has COVID caused onto the global aviation industry recently? Here is the dataset I'm working on. It has the year months of each record, also includes the in-out data for passenger frequent and mail for each row. Today, we will be focusing on the passenger and frequent column. Okay. First, I have created a graph to visualize the monthly average number of quantity of passengers and frequent in the past 5 years. The reason that I'm doing monthly comparison is because 2020's latest data is only updated to May yet, and it would be unfair to compare them yearly. And I believe that the virus has only decreased the passenger transportation. For passenger, the graph indicates a distinct drop down instead of keeping the pattern of slightly increasing for years. The frequent data has been constant for the past 5 years, even under the pandemic situation. Since now we are focusing on the data in 2020, there are approximately around 9 million passengers have flew in and out of Australia, also 400,000 tons of frequent. And after that, I also created a graph to see how it changes detailedly in each month instead of the yearly graph. Is it dropping continuously or suddenly started from a certain point of time? I have created two lists, one for the passenger and another one for the frequent. Each of them are ranged through by a variable in range 1 to 6 that represents the months. By the end of that, the output have been appended to the lists. Then I will have the data I need for graphing. The graph highlights that it's dropping continuously instead of from a specific point of time. The descent rate from January to March is close to linear, as you see, and March to April has a faster descending rate, which is reflecting the process from most people are careless and ignoring the virus from the early stage to that significant moment when New South Wales daily new case statistics was over 200 and all the toilet papers were out of stock, and which is end of March, and it matches the graph perfectly. People's vigilance has been bigger and bigger as time flies in the first 3 months, when all the unnecessary activities has been cancelled, such as international travels, business visits, etc. Most of the activities were moved to online, and they caused the recession directly. Once the government has released further lockdown restrictions, passenger aviation industry will drop to the bottom of the valley, where you can't see much changes between April and May.
1 minute.
And okay, and in the meanwhile, the frequent flight data doesn't seem like to be affected much by the pandemic. I assume it's due to the reason of the needs of the market. Most of the factories and business remain functioning during the time, including exporting and importing needed products. Additionally, I analyzed the quantity of passengers in four Australian airports: Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth, by comparing each of their data monthly together in order to see if all of them are sticking closely with the monthly pattern or some of them are out of the ordinary. As a result, the graph is matching with the monthly graph that I've got earlier. And Melbourne has about 65% of Sydney's. Brisbane has around
Wrap it up.
okay, sure, around 60% of Melbourne's, and Perth has 75% of Brisbane's passengers approximately. And here's the last one. Same pattern is also displayed within the frequent graph, where the four airports have a similar occupation in all the months. The only difference is that overall frequent quantity is staying as a constant level instead of descending as a passenger transportation. So in 2020, the COVID pandemic has only caused the descending in passenger transportation instead of the entire aviation industry. Thanks, and that's all my presentation. Ben, you are muted.
That's better. Yeah, they're all very interesting. I think that it's a pretty clear impact on the data. It's really interesting to see data that relates to a current event. Like seeing things happening in real time is very interesting. It's interesting that we haven't seen more of that sort of thing in the news, but I think that's for the reasons you mentioned about it not being all that up to date. On the stuff that you were doing when you were zooming into 2020, one of the problems you have with time series data is that you get seasonal variations. And so you might see that like maybe in May people don't fly because they just don't go on holiday. Now that's probably not true, but it's always good to show one or two other years at the same time so you can see how your aberrant year, your different year, compares to the standard. So that would be interesting to see, like, well, what happened in 2019, which is the most recent year we have, compared to 2020? Did people sort of drop off in that time? Scarlett and Phoebe, do you have any thoughts?
I thought initially it was really interesting to find out that the freight wasn't decreased. I think maybe it would have been good, like you were saying, to have a look at that versus the previous years a little bit closer, because there was clear reductions in passengers, but I think it would have been nice to see the freight decrease as well, because whilst people weren't allowed to move, product still was between countries. So that could have been something really interesting to look into. But I think, yeah, it was good insights into passenger movements.